Okay guys, so I finally got in my right-handed HAIBO STEED in to replace the left-handed HAIBO STEED that I gave to my cousin. So this feels way better, a lot more natural, and it's pretty much the same as the one that I gave away to my cousin. It feels smooth, good thumb bar feel, metal frame, carbon composite or graphite side plates. The external dial though does feel a tad better, so I think there may be some quality control issues over there with HAIBO, and the star drag doesn't feel as good as the left-handed version I gave to my cousin, meaning the clicks are very vague. If you can hear that going counterclockwise, they are very, you can barely hear the clicks and it feels a little flimsy. Of course the cast control knob does not click. But anyway, this reel actually this time around only cost me $55 on AliExpress. So go figure. The left-handed version initially cost me $58 and this one costed $55. And if you saw the previous unboxing on the HAIBO STEED that I did, you'll know that this reel came with a lot of extras. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so of course it came with the paperwork, and it came with the nice little HAIBO STEED pouch, HAIBO pouch I should say, and it also came with these hybrid ceramic orange seal bearings and extra magnets, and that's very important in this test. Now if you saw the on the water video with the HAIBO STEED where I was fishing for trout, you'll know that the standard braking or the standard magnets that were installed from the factory were not strong enough on their own to be able to, you know, comfortably cast the lures to my liking. I had to turn the spool tension up a lot. Now what I did was, before I handed off the reel to my cousin, I actually installed the extra magnets that came with the reel. And what I had to do, if you remember, the magnets did not want to sit in the seats in the brake hub. So what I did to solve that issue is I used super glue. I just put a little dab in each little hole, one by one. I put a magnet in, and if you can see it says N and S, so north and south polarity. I tried to match that up as best as possible, and then let each magnet individually dry before I installed the next one, and that seemed to work. He's been fishing the STEED Lure Killer Big Trout combo with really light lures and having good success. So before we get out on the casting field to do the measurements, I'm going to install the magnets, and I'm also going to put in these hybrid ceramic bearings, since they came with the STEED and I can consider them as stock. Okay guys, I'll show you the finished results of when I do that. Okay guys, so I finally got these magnets glued into place, and what a pain in the ass that was. Got a bunch of super glue on my fingers and thumb, and yeah, I hope I got the polarities right, but if not, oh well. If it affects the performance of the STEED, then HAIBO should have installed these from the factory so we wouldn't have to mess with them. So anyways, I'm going to install the orange seal ceramic bearings that came with the STEED, and that gives me a perfect chance to show you guys why I like the STEED and why I think it's going to win this battle. and that is spool weight. Now the spool weight of the XF50 without the bearing is 11.4 grams, and by bait finesse standards that is actually really heavy. There are some, you know, non-bait finesse reels with lighter spools than this. Now the STEED, it only weighs 8.5 grams. So this is more than 3 grams lighter than the Scorpion BFS spool from Shimano, if that tells you anything. And that reel costs, you know, at least $250. And I think they achieved that by having a much lighter metal, it's probably aluminum, for the spool shaft. And the spool shaft, as you can see, is a little bit shorter for the STEED. Now both of these spools are 34 millimeters. But as you can see, the STEED holds significantly less line. So one spooled with line, this is actually going to weigh even less than it does now versus the STEED spool. So yeah, there we go. Now here's the magnet configuration for the XF50. There's 6 of them, and they seem to be, I don't know if they're neodymium, but they seem to work just fine without having any kind of, you know, having to put any kind of extra magnets. And you can just fish the XF50 out of the box with no problem. So that's a thumbs up for the Tsurunoya. So I'm going to go ahead and install the orange seal bearings that came with the STEED. But while I got the scale out, I'm going to show you guys the lures I'm going to be throwing. I'm going to be throwing 2 lures, just like the Monster 7-way finesse baitcaster Shootout. I'm going to be throwing the 1/8 ounce Rapala minnow. It's 3.5 grams, so a true 1/8 ounce. And then this little crankbait that is 1.75 grams, so that's a true 1/16 ounce. This is probably the smallest any real bait finesse guy is going to throw, but yeah, this is really going to test the HAIBO STEED right here. And I'm going to, of course, I'm going to be using the 4-pound monofilament right here from Bass Pro Shop's Crappie Max. And I'm going to be using the very same Shimano Trout 1 ultralight 5-foot long rod. And the reason I'm using that rod and using these same lures, basically doing the same test, is I wanted to see how the STEED's numbers would fare against those other much more expensive dedicated finesse baitcasters like the DAIWA SS Air and the Conquest BFS, etc., etc. Okay, so I'm gonna install these ball bearings and get out on the field, and we'll see what's what. Okay guys, so first up we have the Tsurunoya XF50, and we're going to be starting out throwing the 1/8 ounce Rapala minnow. I have the spool tension set to just eliminate the side-to-side play, and the external brake looks like it's on 7. So here we go. "72 feet 8 inches. "69 feet 6 inches. "67 feet 8 inches. "70 feet even. 67 feet 9 inches. Okay guys, now we are switching up to the 16th ounce minnow with the XF50. Spool tension is set the same. Now strangely enough, I was able to go to between 7 and 6 on the external brakes. So here we go. "50 feet 8 inches. "52 feet even. "54 feet 5 inches. "51 feet 8 inches. "53 feet 9 inches. Okay guys, so of course up next we have the HAIBO STEED. First we're going to be throwing the 1/8 ounce Rapala minnow. I have the external brakes, the magnets set all the way to the maximum, and I have the spool tension set really tight, so the lure barely even falls when I press the thumb bar, and you guys will see why. So here we go. "71 feet 2 inches. "66 feet 11 inches. "66 feet 5 inches. "66 feet 5 inches. "64 feet even. Okay guys, time for the 16th ounce little crankbait with the HAIBO STEED. Now strangely enough, I was actually able to turn down the spool tension a little bit, and the brakes were the same on the magnetic side. So here we go. "52 feet 2 inches. "53 feet 10 inches. "57 feet even. "62 feet 5 inches. "57 feet 7 inches. Okay guys, so yesterday I took out the HAIBO STEED and the XF50 out for the measured field tests, and the results were so shocking and surprising that it took me a day to be able to collect all the things that I wanted to say about the experience and write them down to complete this video. So before we go over that, let me go over a couple of things first. Now, if you go on AliExpress and look for the HAIBO STEED, you'll see that there's also a white model that has a similar very shallow spool. Now, some people have commented as to what is the difference between that one and this one. And the difference is that that spool is heavier. It's less ported, and it's got centrifugal brakes attached to it. And I saw a video by a Russian guy that took out the spool for that particular white HAIBO STEED and weighed it, and it weighed about 15 grams. So that spool is actually a lot heavier. So yeah, so there's the reason why I got another red one with the magnetic brakes instead of the white one with the centrifugal brakes. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to weigh these spools when filled with line. I already took the liberty of taking the bearings off. So the HAIBO STEED, the spool without line weighed in at 8.5 grams. So with line it weighs 11.6, so it gained about 3 grams when it was filled up with line. Now the XF50 I believe weighed 11.4 or 11.5 grams without line. So with line you're looking at 17.1. So basically when filled with line, the gap between the two as far as rotational mass actually increased. So this was 3 grams lighter than this before you filled them up with line, and now that gap jumped up to literally 5 grams for the spools filled with line, and that's pretty significant. This actually weighs less than the Scorpion BFS when filled with line as well. Okay, so let's get to these results. Okay guys, so let's do the results of the 1/8 ounce minnow first. Now, coming in second place is the HAIBO STEED with an average of 67 feet even. And coming in first for this particular lure is the Tsurunoya XF50 with an average of 69.6 feet. So roughly about the same as it did last time, maybe a little bit less because there was less wind. But the Tsurunoya XF50 with its much heavier spool outcasted the HAIBO STEED with its much lighter spool by almost a yard, basically 2.6 feet. So big shocking result there. More on that later. Okay, so let's get to the results of probably the more important result is the 1/16 ounce mini crankbait. Now here's where the tables were turned. The XF50 came in second place with an average of 52.6 feet, so it did a little bit better than the last test. But the STEED beat it out convincingly with 56.6 feet average. And that's pretty good. It came close to the Scorpion BFS, which averaged 59 feet in the big 7-way shootout. Okay, so let's talk about the how they got to these results. Now, the one thing I can say is that this HAIBO STEED is potentially a great bait finesse reel that is ruined, absolutely ruined, by these cheap, sorry brakes. As you can see, I installed all the brakes, and even with the brakes installed, I had to turn the external dial all the way up and really tighten up the spool tension. And even with the brakes turned all the way up and the tightened spool tension, I could not cast this 1/8 ounce minnow overhead to get a longer result without backlashing it so bad. And if I tightened the spool tension to the point where it wouldn't backlash, the distance was much shorter, so I had to resort, as you can see, to a sidearm cast. Now granted, even with the sidearm cast, it did pretty much almost match the XF50, But still, it was very frustrating. There is no way I would be able to fish comfortably like that. And as you can see, I was actually able to comfortably overhead cast the 16th ounce crankbait with no issues with the STEED. So I don't know what was going on with that. I do know these brakes are horrible. They are holding this reel back. They're holding this really awesome spool back. Now, I don't know if it's because that I may have installed these ceramic bearings and it may have they may be too fast. But yeah, that was something that really puzzled me. And another thing was that it handled the 16th ounce crankbait a lot easier and more natural than the XF50, which required kind of like a modified lob cast to get this thing out there. So yeah, really shocking results, but you know, what can I expect for 58 bucks? Or in this case, 55 bucks. Now, one thing I can say is this is a reel that was probably just put together on paper, and it doesn't seem like they actually had anyone go out and test it to see if it actually worked. Well, it feels like this reel here was actually tested in the field before they released it to the public. So let me show you what I mean. Now the XF50, the brakes are really strong, and if you can see here, every other brake looks like it has a black dot. So I guess that tells you the north-south polarity of each one. While the STEED, there was no such thing, so I kind of had to guess, and I had my own way of guessing north-south polarity, but it still wasn't enough. So if they use this braking system in this reel, this would be a killer bait finesse reel for sure. But I'm not going to give up on the STEED just yet. I'm going to take these bearings out and swap them back in with the stock bearings and see if that tames it for the 1/8 ounce lure. I'm not going to do a field test, but I do have a budget bait finesse rod that's coming in, and I'll probably do a creek video for you guys to see if that worked. But yeah, this is potentially a great fishing reel ruined by an awful braking system that was obviously not researched and tested in the field by anyone, it seems like. So that is one reason why reels from Shimano, DAIWA, even Abu Garcia Japan cost so much, because they actually have pro staff that they pay to actually go out and help develop their products. So yeah, that's what I have to say about the HAIBO STEED. Now there's some other problems that I had with the STEED, which I will go over in a separate video, but let's go over some other things. Okay, so as far as what I liked about the STEED over the XF50, I like the fact that it has an aluminum frame, and I think it palms a little bit better for me. Now both of them are comfortable to palm. I like the position of the thumb bar. It feels like a Shimano in the way that it's really high up on the spool. I like that better. And I like the fact that these knobs are rubber and they feel more comfortable than the ones on the XF50. And of course I like this lighter spool. Okay, so what do I like about the XF50? I like the much longer handle. I believe this is 90 millimeters while this is only 80. And you can see the big difference there. The star drag, while they're both kind of weak, this one feels more positive and refined. I like the braking system better, obviously. And I like the fact that the external dial is numbered so you can see where you're at. And I like the fact that this has a really big micro click spool tension. Very nice. Oh, and I like the fact that this came with extra bearings, even though it may or may not have hindered the performance. Okay guys, so there we go. While the results were mixed, this won the 1/8 ounce contest, this won the 16th ounce contest. The fact that this was almost unfishable to a certain extent, I'm gonna have to call this a tie. There's no way I can say this is a better bait finesse reel than this with the way that these brakes behaved. So once again, I'm gonna be tinkering around with that and change the bearings out and whatnot. So yeah, there we go. The HAIBO STEED versus the Surinoi XF50 looks like it's gonna end in a tie, despite being on paper this being a much more superior reel for finesse applications. So that's a big shocker. Alright guys, thanks a lot.